I got out of the regular Army and went into the National Guard, and that was my first real taste of the National Guard, but really, really good people there. Very interesting in the way they do business. They have a very limited amount of time to do the same stuff the regular Army does. So what normally happens is you have some people that work full time and they go advance on the drills and the movements and things that they have to do during the week, so that on the weekends the traditional soldiers, they show up and they can, jump in the tanks or whatever they need to do. Well, one day we were down at Camp Shelby, and we had a big tank maneuver exercise coming up. So they had the full-time people had to go down in advance and draw equipment, and a lot of it is just training stuff. It's Velcroed on the side of the tank, and it's just sensors that tell when the the staged battle or the electronic battle happens, if you were hit, if you fired, stuff like that. But the problem with it is all that stuff has to be turned in before you leave the training area or Camp Shelby, and we have meetings all through this thing that tell us what stage we're in, and have we completed, have we turned our stuff in, and then the last thing they do is they assign a clearing officer, and the clearing officer has to go make sure all the barracks are clean, has to make sure the chow hall is cleaned and all the silverware is turned in. He has to make sure all the bunks are clean and all the linens changed and all the training materials are turned in. And what they usually do is they get a lieutenant, a new lieutenant. And that's danger in itself, because new lieutenants, they don't have the experience to know, or they don't understand the whole process. So imagine this lieutenant gets over to this warehouse, and there's 4 huge trucks, big Hemet trucks. These are like half the size of a dump truck. And they got all of this wet, Velcroed gear that was on these tanks as they were maneuvering down to these low areas. And what the lieutenant didn't realize is the buses and everything that was going to take the soldiers back home was supposed to leave in about 3 hours. So he went into a panic, because he knew that this material, this Velcro and all these electronic devices, had to be cleaned and dried and repackaged in their boxes and turned back in. And he knew that couldn't be done in 3 hours. But what he didn't know was that's why the people come on the advance, and that's why the full-time people stay later, because after the traditional guys have gone back, they're still down there for about a week turning in all this stuff. But the guy who was in charge of it was a real old guy, a real old staff sergeant. We all called him Mikey, because he was just always into antics or something. And so this lieutenant's standing in front of Mikey like my hand. He's standing there and he's telling Mikey that there's no way that he's going to get this stuff turned in time. And if we keep the soldiers down there, they're going to miss the bus, and how we're going to feed them, and how we're going to pay them, and he just can't figure it out. And the whole time he's talking to him, Mikey's doing this. He's kind of shuffling to the right, he's kind of shuffling to the left, and he's just basically ignoring this lieutenant, but he's just seeing how far he can take him. So this young lieutenant tells this old staff sergeant, he finally just calls him to attention, what we call locks his heels. He said, "Sergeant Heatherly," he says, "there's something that's more important than what I'm trying to explain to you right now?" And Heatherly reached in his pockets and he said, "Yes, sir." He said, "If you got a solid quarter for 2 dimes and a nickel, there's a Coke machine back there, and I'm getting kind of thirsty." Well, we sent him on home and cleared it out. He just didn't understand the lieutenant, so that was a lesson for him. My National Guard unit was selected to go to Iraq, and this was in 2004, so we had to train up, and we spent the whole year of 2005 in Iraq. And since no one from that unit had ever been deployed before, it was a whole new learning experience for us. So we trained hard and we were ready. But we had an executive officer. He was always really, really timid. I mean, he was scared. He was fully buttoned up, fully uniformed. I mean, he was even flak vest and pistol and everything when he went to the showers. Well, because it was that kind of a situation where we were in the edge of a town, we had to deal with the governor, we had to deal with their like executive branch for that area. We were in a province. And this executive officer we had, he really didn't want to get out of the convoy vehicles once we got there. I mean, he was just afraid. And well, we went in there and we had a meeting with the governor. We all came back, and this executive officer, he did go in eventually, but he had to be escorted by the guards, our own guards. And the commander we had, he was a real good guy, but he was a character too. So he told the executive officer, he said, now, and I'll just call him Bob, he'll say, Bob, now these people, they're a lot like us. They just want, take care of their family and not live in an environment that's, full of firing and military vehicles and trucks and guns, and they kind of common. He said, you need to just talk to them and open up. So the executive officer, he goes and he gets back in the Humvee, and he's fully buttoned up, and he's sitting there with a death grip on his M4 rifle. And, well, the commander came back over there and he looked at him and he saw how tense he was, and he said, Bob, he said, you got to relax a little bit. He said, now, take for example, he said, there's a kid right over there. He said, why don't you just, open your door and talk to that kid? He said, he's no threat. So old Bob relaxed a little bit, the executive officer, and he put his rifle away and he opened his door and he said, hey young man, he said, how you doing? The little kid said, screw you, screw you, screw you. He didn't know any better. So the executive officer, he got his first taste of people are just people.